Hello there, welcome back to Hydroponics Daily. Today's subject is what to do when you find toadstools and mushrooms growing in your grow media, in your compost. You might panic. You might think, oh my God, I've got a disease. Or you might think, oh, it's okay, it's mycorrhizal fungi. They are of benefit to my plants. However, neither are really true. So by far the most common species you'll find is a fungus that's yellow, and it grows in coco substrates normally, and it's called the Flowerpot Parasol, or the yellow parasol, or the Flowerpot Parasol, or the plant pot dappling. That's nice, isn't it? The plant pot dappling. It's a species of gilled mushroom in the Agariaceae family, so the same family as the fly agaric, the hallucinogenic red and white toadstool that is famous for both being poisonous and hallucinogenic. However, its scientific name is Leucoprinus birnbaumi. Easy for me to say. It is toxic, so don't eat it. Don't just pick up a few mushrooms and try to eat it. What they say about mushrooms, when someone says, can I eat this? And a mycologist will often say, a mycologist is someone who studies mushrooms, will say, you can eat anything once. But don't eat Leucoprinus birnbaumi because it's poisonous. However, it's not doing your plants any harm. It's not doing them pretty much any good either. What it's doing is just eating your grow media. It's what plant scientists used to call a saprophyte, which means eats dead material. However, it's now called a saprotroph, and that's because fungi are not plants, and phyte means plants. So it's not a saprophyte, it's a saprotroph, meaning it eats dead material. Mushrooms and toadstools are more closely related to you than they are a plant. So traditionally, before we knew this, people used to think just lump plants and fungi together. But now when you eat a mushroom, you're more closely related to eating some meat than you are to a plant. Interesting. It's basically fungi are like animals, but they just stay still. They don't photosynthesize, they don't make their own meat, they eat. Anyway, back to the Flowerpot Parasol. It's normally occurring when the grow media is a bit too wet, and so it's decomposing, and the conditions are right for fungal growth. And then the toadstool appears when it's matured, and the toadstool represents only a tiny fraction, a couple of % of the actual biomass of the whole plant. So if you've got the toadstools, a vast quantity of them is in the grow media growing and eating your grow media. So not doing a massive amount of damage, but probably degrading your grow media over time. And I wouldn't worry about it. It's a sign that you've not put anything on your grow media that's going to kill your plants. There are a lot of chemicals and additives that are sold to hydroponic growers or tried to be sold to hydroponic growers that are really poisonous to soil biology. So if you were applying, say, a copper-based fertilizer, there's a number of these that have appeared on the market recently, which is pissing me off because I hate copper-based fertilizers because they are extremely toxic and bad for biology and bad for plants and bad for users. If you were applying one of those copper-based products, then you wouldn't have the Flowerpot Parasol. It would have killed it off. And you would have killed off all the other good biology that you never get to see. Things like springtails and planktonic bacteria and protozoa and things like that. So I wouldn't worry about it. I'd use it a bit like springtails as a sign that your grow media is healthy and you've not killed off the soil biology. Yes, it might be in your grow media, just like springtails might be a bit, but don't worry. Obviously, spores can be an issue. If you inhale a shed load of spores into your lungs, then you can get something called farmer's lung. But you can get that from mildew. Like if you shook all your plants that had mildew, then you can get something called farmer's lung. It doesn't have to be a toxic fungus to do that. It just suddenly your body takes in so much fungus that your lungs get coated in spores. So don't do that. As I say, so the Flowerpot Parasol is a yellow fungus. I have seen it in hydroponic distributors' warehouses where they've stored rack upon rack of coco. And the coco they brought in has been too wet. And all the parasol fungus has grown out of the bags, out of the holes, the little air pockets in the bags. It's really interesting. And but nothing to worry about. But you probably couldn't sell that bag of cocoa if it had it. You'd probably want to remove that before you tried to sell it. One issue where this fungus can be a problem is in pot plants and house plants, because it produces something called sclerotia. And if you listen to my other podcast, Serial Killers, you know sclerotia are a mass of spores that develop in fungus in a certain part of its life cycle. They're fairly big and they sit on the soil surface. And with the problem with the parasol dapperling, or the flowerpot parasol, is that these, because it's from a yellow fungus, they sit on the surface and they sort of look like dust, or I don't know what would you describe it as, like tiny little blobs on the surface, and they just look unsightly. So if you're growing something like an orchid, then people won't buy it if you've got this on it. So that's something to consider as well. If you're growing a plant that's where you're also selling the grow media, these can be a big problem. And it's a fungus common throughout the tropics and subtropics. And you think, well, why is it growing in Scotland or Ohio or Ireland? And that's because it's coming in bags of cocoa. So it's coming in from Sri Lanka and Indonesia and places like that. So that's why you're getting it in England and Australia and North America, Europe, places like that. So it's very common. So you might often find it peaks in July and August in these places when it's really hot. What else can we say about it? Toxicity, it'll cause stomach upset and gastrointestinal irritant. The North Carolina State University classifies the species as having a medium severity poison characteristics. So it's not like the deadly, death cap or something like that. That woman tried to, in Australia, killed all her family with, or allegedly. So the trial's currently ongoing. Let's say, yeah, she's accused of killing her family with the deadly caps of, some species. This one is, medium severity. It wouldn't be my weapon of choice if I was going to knock someone off. The yellow colour is from an alkaloid known as burnbimans. So it's got its own type of chemical for its pigment, which is pretty cool. I mean, not many funguses have that. I mean, not sure if anyone's actually looked at usefulness of that pigment, but it's interesting to know. Could be a side project for anyone who's got loads of these fungi growing. I know we've certainly had lots of it in our grow room when we've been growing in cocoa, and it's thought to contain a number of interesting antimicrobial compounds, and the scientific community is on the lookout for new antibiotics because of antibiotic resistance, and so it could be a new source of antibiotics. Other fungi you might find in plants coming from around the world, the number of mycorrhizal have been found growing, like at Kew Gardens, in their Australian plants and things, they find amazing and wacky toadstools appearing every now and again. And normally they're completely harmless. I don't know of any fungi that have been introduced that massive issue mycorrhizal-wise, but you could get a plant disease that is infected, comes in on infected plant growing media. Things like sudden oak death, ash dieback. What's the big one in grapes and olives? Xylella, something like that. And grapes as well. Olives, grapes was phylloxera. So you need to be careful when it comes to importing plants, and that's why plants come with a phytosanitary certificate. But grown media doesn't, interestingly. So you will get these saprotrophs, but they're not plant diseases, so nothing to worry about. That's been Hydroponics Daily for today. What to do if you get a crazy yellow toadstool appearing in your grow room. Don't eat it. It's not a magic mushroom. It's not edible. Just chill out, really. That's been Hydroponics Daily for today. I'm off home to eat some fish and chips. See you again tomorrow. Thank you very much for listening.